You know what the strangest part is. You have almost certainly held this creature in your hands already. In a shop, on a plate. Maybe you've even eaten it in a salad. And not once did it cross your mind that you were looking at, quite possibly, the closest thing to an alien mind on the entire planet. I'm serious. Let me tell you a few things, and we'll see whether you agree with me by the end. This creature has 3 hearts, not 1, like you and me, 3. Its blood is blue. It has no bones at all. Its whole body is soft, like jelly. It tastes the world with the skin of its arms. It changes color faster than you can blink. And if it gets bored in an aquarium, it will wait for nightfall, unscrew the lid from the inside, and escape. That's a real case. We'll get to it, and it will take your breath away. And here's the part that stings a little. All our lives, we stare up at the sky. We build telescopes. We listen for signals. We ask, surely someone else is out there. Another mind, unlike our own. And all this time, it was right here, down below. In the water, we wade into up to our knees every summer, watching us with its strange eyes. And who knows, maybe thinking exactly the same thing about us. Its name is the octopus. And by the end of this video, I promise, you will no longer be able to call it seafood. You're watching amazing animals, by the way, and I love telling the stories of creatures we understand far less well than we like to think. So get comfortable. We have plenty to surprise you with. Let's go back in time for a moment. Far, far back, 600 million years. In the ancient ocean, a small, utterly unremarkable creature is drifting along, our shared ancestor. The octopus's ancestor too, by the way. One single ancestor for us all. And then its descendants reached a fork in the road and went down 2 very different paths. Down the first road went the ones who would eventually become fish, then lizards, then birds, then mammals, and right at the very end, you and me. We all share the same blueprint, a back with a spine, a brain tucked inside a skull, and nerves running out from it like the wiring in a house. And down the second road went snails and mussels, oysters. You'll admit, not the crowd you'd expect geniuses to come from. Slow, soft, usually just sitting in a shell, and, frankly, not the sharpest tools in the box. Have you ever seen a snail solve a puzzle? Scientists call this second crowd the mollusks, and the octopus is a special, most advanced branch of them, the cephalopods. It's a funny word, but an accurate one from the Greek. It means head feet. And it's true, the octopus's arms grow straight out of its head. Beyond that, it has almost nothing else. Now brace yourself, because out of this very branch, the branch of snails and oysters, a predator suddenly appeared, out of nowhere, with an enormous brain, one that opens jars, uses tools, and, by every sign, gets bored when it has nothing to do. Do you see the trick here? The octopus is not some relative of ours that simply took a similar road. It's a mind that grew up entirely on its own, from a blank page, on a completely different plan from ours. You know the simplest way to put it. Nature, twice, in 2 different corners of the planet, independently invented the mind. Once inside our heads, and a second time right here, on the seabed, in a former snail. As if 2 different engineers, without ever talking to each other, built a thinking machine out of completely different parts. Scientists even have a lovely word for this: convergence, a coming together. Different roads to a similar result, like the wing of a bird and the wing of a bat. Different family trees, and yet both ended up with a wing. There was, by the way, a distant ancestor of the octopus that did wear a shell. You may have seen its relative, the nautilus, that beautiful spiral shell with eyes that still lives in the ocean today. And there were the ammonites too, those stone spirals that paleontologists dig up. That's roughly what the youth of this family looked like. Hide inside a little house and sit tight. But the octopus's ancestors made a bold choice. They threw away the shell, gave up their armor, and that, if you think about it, is a terrifying decision. Like a knight taking off his armor in the middle of the battlefield. Why? Because armor is also a prison. It's heavy, it's slow. In it, you can't squeeze through a crack, can't chase down prey, can't outrun a shark. So the octopus struck a deal with evolution. It gave up protection, and in exchange it got speed, flexibility, and, above all, brains. Because if you're soft and defenseless, there's only one way left to survive. Be smarter than everything around you. And there's your first paradox for today. The octopus grew clever precisely because it became defenseless. Weakness made it a genius. There are around 300 species of these geniuses in the ocean right now. From a giant as tall as a person to a tiny thing that would fit on your fingernail. And nearly every one of them can do something we simply wouldn't believe if we hadn't seen it with our own eyes. So let's start with the most incredible thing of all, with its brain, or rather, with its brains. It has 9 of them. In case you were wondering, here's a fact that made my head spin the first time I heard it. The octopus does not have 1 brain. It has, if we count honestly, 9. 1 in its head, between the eyes, and another 8, 1 in each arm. Now, hold your laughter, and let me explain what that actually means. No clickbait, only what scientists have proven. Take neurons, those are nerve cells, the very building blocks of thought. Roughly speaking, the more of them there are, the more complex behavior can be. Well, the octopus has around 500 million of them. 500 million. That's about the same as a dog. For what it's worth. For a mollusk, the number is fantastical. A snail has a few thousand. The octopus, hundreds of millions. But the most interesting part isn't how many there are. It's where they are. In you and me. Almost all our nerve cells are gathered in one place. In the head. In the brain. A command center, and the body just obeys. In the octopus, it's the other way round. About 2/3 of all its neurons sit not in the head, they're in the arms. By rough count, around 350 million thinking cells are spread across those 8 arms. So the arm of an octopus is not a tentacle being ordered around from above. It's almost a small, independent brain of its own. With its own nerves, its own computing power, its own sense of what it's touching right now. Scientists have even found a separate nerve cord running inside each arm, a kind of spinal cord for the arm that runs along it and steers its movement on the spot without asking the head. And here's the proof that finished me off. They ran an experiment. An octopus pushes an arm into a murky maze to reach a piece of crab. Well, the arm found its way to the food on its OWN, even when the octopus's eyes physically could not see where it was crawling. The head isn't watching, and the arm still knows exactly where to go. There's more. If an arm is, forgive science for the cruelty, separated from the body, it goes on living its own life for a while. It moves, it grabs food, it pulls it toward where the mouth would be. The arm has no idea the octopus is no longer there. It just carries on doing its job. At this point you might be thinking, hang on, then how does it not grab itself? 8 flexible arms, each thinking for itself, all covered in suckers. Why don't they cling to one another and tie themselves in a knot? Excellent question, and scientists asked it too, and they discovered something beautiful. The octopus's skin produces a special substance by which the suckers recognize their own. Put simply, the arms can taste that this is me, my own body. Don't grab. A built-in self-recognition, so that the left arm doesn't go to war with the right. Nature thought of even that. And now, the question that makes you feel just a little uneasy. If each arm thinks for itself, feels for itself, decides for itself, then who exactly is the octopus? Is it one creature? Or is it 9, 8 clever arms, and one conductor in the head, who have somehow agreed to live together and act as one? I'll be honest with you. Science doesn't yet know the exact answer. Some scientists believe the head is in charge, after all, and the arms are brilliant but subordinate. Others say, no, this is a genuine distributed mind, a mind with no single center, smeared across the whole body. And that, to me, is the most thrilling part. We're used to the idea that I is the thing sitting in the head, but the octopus, it seems, lives an entirely different way. And maybe feeling like an octopus means feeling like 9 at once. Try to picture that, even for a second. I can't. And yet, for the octopus, that's every moment of its life. All right, we've sorted out the brains. Now let's take a look under the hood. Quite literally. The octopus has 3 hearts. And I'll say it again. This is not a pretty metaphor for a song. It's plain anatomy. You can count them. 2 of the hearts are called the gill hearts. Their job is simple, to pump blood through the gills. The gills are like lungs, only for water. The blood picks up oxygen as it passes through them. And the 3rd heart, the main one, is the systemic heart. It takes that oxygen-rich blood and pumps it around the whole body, into all 8 arms, and into the brain. 2 small pumps charge the blood with oxygen. 1 big pump sends it around the body. Makes sense, but the question is, why all the fuss? 1 heart is enough for us. The reason is that the octopus's blood is a rather poor carrier of oxygen, weaker than ours, and the body has to add extra pumps to push the oxygen where it needs to go after all. And why is it weaker? Well, here's the loveliest part. Because of its color, the octopus's blood is blue. Look, your blood and mine is red because the oxygen in it is carried by a special protein, hemoglobin. And at the heart of hemoglobin sits iron. Iron, when it grabs oxygen, turns red, exactly like a nail rusting in the open air. And there's the red color of our blood. In essence, we have liquid rust running through our veins. Forgive me for the image. In the octopus, instead of hemoglobin, a different protein does the work, hemocyanin, and at its core is not iron, but copper. And copper, when it grabs oxygen, turns not red, but blue, like a copper roof gone green with age, or an old coin. That's where the color comes from. Blue blood isn't a fairy tale about aristocrats. It's just the plain chemistry of copper. And this chemistry has a purpose. The copper carrier really does haul less oxygen than the iron one, but it works beautifully where oxygen is scarce and the water is cold, in the dark depths of the ocean. Down there, our iron blood would start to suffocate, while the octopus's copper blood copes just fine. Every single detail of this creature is tuned for life in the cold and the dark, where we can only descend in a diving suit. And now, a detail that makes me feel genuinely sorry for the octopus, on a human level. When the octopus swims, that main systemic heart almost stops beating. It comes to a standstill. It swims in a funny way. By the way, it draws water into its body and then forces it out through a special little tube, a funnel called the siphon, and it's pushed backwards like a rocket. Jet propulsion, all very grown up, but it only looks graceful from the outside. Because every one of those swims exhausts it terribly, because its heart is standing still the whole time. Imagine having to run a 100-meter sprint while holding your breath. You finish and gulp for air. That's how the octopus feels after every dash through the water. Which is why, and this is rather touching, octopuses can't stand swimming. They'd much rather crawl along the bottom, slowly, unhurried, feeling their way over every stone with their arms. Not because they're lazy, but because, for them, swimming is a small kind of torture. So next time you see an octopus creeping along the seabed in no rush at all, know this: it isn't being lazy. It's simply sparing its tired heart. One of the three. Now for my favorite trick in the whole animal kingdom. And, honestly, one of the most beautiful unsolved mysteries in science. The octopus changes color, not over minutes, like a chameleon, but in fractions of a second. Lying on sand, it's sandy yellow. Crawled onto a rock, it's turned brown and mottled. Pressed up against seaweed, it's covered in stripes and become the seaweed. It dissolves into the background so completely that you're looking straight at it, and you don't see it. Divers tell the story. It swam beside a rock all afternoon, and then the rock stood up and swam away. How does it do it? Let's break it down. It's worth it. In the octopus's skin sit millions of tiny sacs of paint. Scientists call them chromatophores. Each little sac is like a microscopic balloon full of ink, with muscles stretched around it. The muscles tense up, the balloon stretches flat, the dot of paint grows large, the color flares, the muscles relax, the paint shrinks to a point, the color vanishes. And here's the key thing. These muscles are commanded directly by the nervous system, straight from the brain, which means the octopus paints across itself as easily and quickly as we wiggle our fingers. It doesn't spend half an hour adjusting. It colors itself instantly, with a thought. It's a living screen, if you like, with millions of colored pixels, and the artist at the controls is its own brain. But it doesn't stop at one layer of paint. Beneath the chromatophores hide two more layers. The first, iridophores. These are mirror cells. They give us shimmering, metallic sheen, blues, greens, mother of pearl, and beneath them, leucophores. White cells that reflect any surrounding light, whatever its shade. 3 layers, working together. And that's why the octopus's palette is richer than any monitor of ours. And on top of all of this, there are also the papillae. These are little bumps and outgrowths with which the octopus changes not its color, but the very texture of its skin. It wants to, it becomes smooth as satin. It wants to, it's covered in spikes and ridges, like coral or a jagged rock. And all of it in a second. It fakes not only the color of the background, but its texture too. No chameleon ever dreamed of such a thing. And it has special effects, even flashier than camouflage. For example, a move scientists nicknamed the passing cloud. A dark wave rolls across the octopus's body, again and again, like the shadow of a cloud sweeping over a field. The thinking is that this hypnotizes a crab. It freezes, transfixed, and in that instant, the octopus grabs it. And if you frighten an octopus, it can flare up in an instant with bright spots, spread its arms wide, and puff itself up, a menacing pose, to make the predator hesitate for a second. Oh, what's this big angry thing? And that second is all it needs to get away. And now, the very paradox that made me start this whole conversation. Sit comfortably. The octopus is colorblind. It cannot tell colors apart. Its eyes are built in such a way that they don't pick up color. In our eye, there are different receivers of light. They are called photoreceptors, and different types catch different colors, which is why the world is colored for us. But the octopus has only one type of receiver, which means it most likely sees the world in black and white, like an old film. Now put the two facts together. A creature that perfectly matches its color to the background cannot itself see that color. It's like a painter making an exact copy of a picture, blindfolded, and never missing a single shade. How can you copy a color you cannot see? This, my friends, is one of the great mysteries of marine biology. There's still no firm answer. But scientists have two guesses, and both are astonishing. The first guess about the pupil. The octopus's pupil is an odd shape, and there's an idea that, because of this shape, light passing through the eye is split slightly into colors, the way a ray of sunlight is split into a rainbow after passing through a drop of water. And so the octopus, perhaps, catches the colors, not all at once, but one at a time, with a clever trick, by adjusting its eye just a little. In other words, it doesn't see color the way we do. It sort of calculates it. And the second guess, this is the one that gives me goosebumps. In the octopus's skin, scientists have found the very same light-sensitive proteins that work in its eyes. Do you see where I'm going? Perhaps its skin can sense light on its own, without eyes. Just think about that sentence for a moment. A body that sees with its entire surface, not looking with eyes, but literally feeling light, and maybe color, with its skin, the way we feel the warmth of the sun on ours. Maybe that's exactly why the octopus matches its coloring so precisely. It isn't the eyes telling the skin what to become. It's the skin itself sensing the background and adjusting to it, patch by patch, almost without the head involved at all. We don't yet know for sure whether that's true. Science is still on the way. But if it is true, then the octopus perceives the world in a way a human can't even properly imagine. You and I see, with just 2 points on our face, all our lives, and it, perhaps with its whole skin, all of it. So tell me honestly, after all that, could your tongue really call it seafood? Now for the body, and for an ability that looks like a plain violation of the laws of physics. There is not a single bone in an octopus's body. Not one. No spine, no ribs, no skull, nothing hard at all. It's made entirely of muscle and water. Scientists call this design a muscular hydrostat, a fancy phrase, but the idea is simple. The body holds its shape not with a skeleton, but through its own tensed muscles and the water inside, like a hose filled with water. Our tongue, by the way, works in a similar way, which is why it's so nimble and flexible. Now picture an animal built entirely out of tongues. That's the octopus. And from this follows a superpower. The octopus can squeeze through any gap wider than the single hardest part of its body. And it only has one hard part. Do you know what it is? The beak. Yes, a real beak, like a parrot's, only small and hidden right at the center, where all 8 arms meet. It's made of the same tough material as our fingernails, chitin. There's nothing else hard in an octopus at all. And the beak of a grown octopus is about the size of a coin. And here's the maths that's hard to believe. A large octopus, the size of a dog, can slip through a hole the size of that very coin. It literally pours itself, like a thick liquid, through the bottleneck and reassembles into an octopus on the other side. You should see it on video. At first, you can't believe there's anything in there. And then, out of a crack you couldn't fit a finger into, a whole animal comes flowing. And because of this, octopuses are the greatest escape artists on Earth. This fame even has a name. His name was Inkai. Inkai lived in an aquarium in New Zealand. An ordinary octopus, a favorite with the visitors. And one night, one of the staff didn't close the lid of his tank all the way. Just a crack. But that was all Inkai needed. What followed is like something from a prison break film. At night, when everyone had gone, Inkai climbs out. He slides down the glass to the floor. He crosses the cold, dark hall soaking wet. He finds a narrow drain pipe on the floor, about 15 centimeters across, and the staff later reconstructed the whole route. He squeezes into it and crawls. And that pipe, as bad luck for the people and good luck for Inkai would have it, led straight to the ocean, to freedom. In the morning, the workers arrive. The tank is empty. Only a long, wet trail stretches across the floor to the drain, like the signature of an escaped genius. Inkai had gone home, to the sea, and no one ever saw him again. Personally, every time I remember this story, I feel a little glad for him. And this, by the way, is no one-off trick. Octopuses in captivity escape constantly. They unscrew the lids of jars from the inside. There'll be a separate story about that later. At night, they quietly slip into the neighboring tank where a fish lives, eat it, and return to their own as if nothing had happened. And in the morning, the keeper scratches his head. Where does the fish keep disappearing to? The tanks are all closed, and the octopus sits there with the most innocent look on its face. A soft body, one single hard part, the beak, and a stubborn, unquenchable desire to be free. You know, there's something in that which commands respect. An octopus is almost impossible to keep locked up. It's always looking for a way out. And, as a rule, it finds one. Since we've started talking about a soft body that flows through any gap, let's step away from the science for a moment and go into legend, because the octopus has left its mark, not only on the ocean, but on our fears. For centuries, sailors told one another about the very same monster. Enormous, many-armed, it rises up out of the black deep, wraps its tentacles around a ship, and drags it down to the bottom, crew and all. This monster had a name, the Kraken. Northern sailors swore they'd seen it with their own eyes. An island that suddenly comes to life, tentacles taller than the masts, a whirlpool where a ship had just gone down. And here's the question, where did this legend come from? People don't invent something like that out of thin air. Behind every monster, there's usually something real, just enlarged by fear and darkness. And almost certainly, the real thing here was the cephalopods, octopuses and their cousins, the squid. Picture a sailor 500 years ago. He knows nothing about biology. And suddenly, by the side of the ship, in the black water, something rises from the deep, soft, seemingly eyeless, all writhing arms and suckers, changing color. He'd go gray on the spot, and when he got home, he'd tell everyone he had seen a demon, and the next storyteller would add a couple of tentacles, and the third would sink a whole ship. And that's how a terrified octopus grows into a kraken. And here's the amusing part. The fear did have a grain of truth about the size, because octopuses really can be genuinely huge. Meet the giant Pacific octopus, the largest of them all. A typical fine specimen weighs around 15 kilograms, and the record holders close to 50, heavier than a grown adult. And if you stretch its arms from tip to tip, the span can be around 4 meters, and by some old accounts, as much as 9. That's already quite the monster to look at, especially if it suddenly appears beside you in murky water. And its strength is a match. Each of those 2,000 suckers can grip hard and pull, and all together they hold with such power that a large octopus, if it wanted to, could handle a small shark. Yes, there is footage of an octopus grabbing and dragging off a shark, not the other way round. So the grabbing part of the legend, too, isn't entirely made up. But now, the truth this was all told for, and it, as always with the octopus, turns the scary story on its head. This huge, powerful giant, capable of overpowering a shark, is actually peaceful, cautious, and comically shy. It doesn't hunt boats. It doesn't lie in wait for divers. It has never sunk a single ship, not in all of history. It lives quietly, hides in crevices, eats crabs and mollusks, and avoids anything large and unfamiliar. Divers who have met one tell an astonishing thing. More often than not, the giant carefully, curiously touches the human with the tip of an arm, as if getting acquainted, and then calmly swims off about its business. No rage, only curiosity. So the Kraken, the sinker of ships, never existed, and the creature that played its part turned out to be its complete opposite. Not a savage monster from the abyss, but a huge, strong, and yet gentle introvert who wants nothing more in all the world than to be left alone. We turned the octopus into a monster simply because we didn't understand it. And honestly, that's very much in our character. We do it often with animals and with each other, and the truth is almost always more interesting than the invention. Here too, the real octopus is far more astonishing than any kraken, and you're about to be utterly convinced of that. Let's come back to the arms. We already know they think, and now what else they get up to. And here, once again, the science fiction begins. On each arm of the octopus, there are rows of suckers. An ordinary octopus has around 2,000 of them, and these are not just stickers for holding on. Each sucker is at once a fingertip, a tongue, and a nose. Inside it are receptors that sense the taste and smell of whatever the sucker has touched. Scientists at Harvard, a few years ago, even found exactly which cells are responsible for this. It turned out the octopus has its own special sensors for taste by touch, found in no other creature. What does that mean in human terms? The octopus tastes the world by touching it. As it reaches an arm into a dark crevice its eye can't peer into, it licks the inside with every sucker and nose at once. A tasty little crab is hiding right here, and that over there is just a rock. Move along. It doesn't need to see its prey. It tastes it before it's even caught it. Imagine being able to taste a soup just by dipping your hand into it, not raising it to your mouth with your palm. That's how the octopus senses the world every second of its life, with 8 arms, with 2,000 tongue suckers, all at once. And now, intelligence in action. 3 stories, each better than the last. Story 1, about the engineer. There's an octopus called the veined octopus, which lives in Indonesia. Divers filmed it gathering halves of coconut shell from the seabed. It carefully digs them out, cleans them, and carries them along. And carrying them is awkward. It waddles clumsily on the tips of its arms. The shell gets in the way. It's clearly spending energy and taking a risk. Why? Because later, out in an open and dangerous spot, it stands the 2 halves together and hides inside, as if in its own little armored house. It had been carrying a shelter with it, for the future, for a danger that hasn't come yet. This is called tool use, and it's the very trait we humans are so proud of. Only humans make tools, people used to say. Then it turned out chimpanzees do too. Then crows. And now, here a mollusk, a former snail, thinking about tomorrow. Story 2, about the actor. There's the mimic octopus, and it is, I won't shy away from the word, a genius of transformation. Mimicry is when one animal pretends to be another. Plenty of creatures do it, but this one went further than all of them. It can impersonate not just one creature, but a whole dozen different ones, and, most remarkably, dangerous ones. It stretches out its arms, folds itself, paints on stripes, and there it is, the spitting image of a venomous sea snake. Or it flattens itself and swims along the bottom as a flatfish, or it spreads out as a venomous, spiny lionfish. Scientists have counted more than a dozen roles in its repertoire. And hold on, it seems to choose the role to fit the particular enemy. A fish approaches that is terrified of sea snakes. The octopus becomes a snake. In other words, it isn't just hiding. It understands exactly who its enemy is afraid of and pretends to be precisely that. And that is no longer a reflex. That is reading another creature's fear. And story 3, my favorite, about the bully. Quite recently, scientists caught an octopus hunting together with fish. Yes, as a team, the fish, with their sharp eyes, spot prey in various nooks, and the long-armed octopus reaches in and pulls it out. A real team. But sometimes one of the fish gets lazy or goes to the wrong spot. And what does the octopus do? It hits it. It flings out an arm and gives the slacking partner a clip round the ear. Scientists wrote it up in a scientific paper exactly like that. The octopus delivers a punch to the fish, apparently to keep the team in line. If that isn't character, then what is? A brain that grew out of the branch of snails, and it solves problems beyond the reach of many animals with a far more respectable pedigree. Now this chapter, I warned you, puts a lot of people off eating octopus for good, because now we are going to talk about personality. The octopus recognizes people, specific people, by their faces. It tells who is who. There was an experiment in one aquarium. They took 2 members of staff and dressed them identically, so the octopus couldn't tell them apart by their outfit. And then one of them fed the octopus every day. A nice person brings food, and the other annoyed it slightly, touched it with a stiff brush on a stick. Nothing awful, not painful, just unpleasant. Only a couple of weeks went by, and the octopus began to behave completely differently towards the 2 of them. Towards the nice one, it would swim closer, reach out, grow paler, and catching sight of the mean one, it would draw back, darken with displeasure, and tense up. It had remembered them. It had told apart 2 identically dressed people and formed its own opinion of each. A separate one, good, bad. And there's more. Aquarium keepers have dozens of stories of an octopus deliberately hosing down the person it didn't like with a jet of water from its siphon. Every time that same person. Scientists treat such tales cautiously. Where's the experiment? And where's just an entertaining anecdote? So I'll tell you honestly, as it is, the rigorous experiment showed one thing for certain. The octopus does tell people apart and remembers who treated it how. And the revenge by water jet is the observation of keepers. Charming, but not from under a microscope. But you'll admit, it fits perfectly. And here's what scientists confirm ironclad. Octopuses have individuality, character, not in the abstract, but measurably. Some individuals are bold and curious. They grab anything new, go exploring, are the first to leave the shelter. Others are cautious, timid, shy. They sit in their burrow and approach anything new warily. And it's a stable trait. A bold octopus is bold today and tomorrow and a month from now. Just like people, some are adventurers all their lives and some are homebodies. Every octopus has its own temperament. These aren't little machines running the same program. These are personalities. And here's the final touch, after which everything falls into place. Octopuses play, just for the sake of it, for something to do. In one experiment, they were given an empty plastic bottle, and a current was switched on in the tank, and some of the octopuses began pushing the bottle into the stream of water. It would drift back. They'd push it again, and again, and again. No benefit at all. You can't eat it. You can't hide in it. Just interesting. Like a child batting a ball around in the water. And play for the sake of play. Curiosity for the sake of curiosity is, by the way, one of the surest signs of a real mind. That's how a creature behaves when there's something in its head and in its arms more than bare instinct. A creature that gets bored. And a creature that gets bored is a creature that has something to think with. For a long time, scientists were certain of one thing. Octopuses are loners. They live alone, meet only to leave offspring, and otherwise avoid one another and want nothing to do with each other. That's what all the textbooks said. And then, off the coast of Australia, on the seabed, they found a city, or rather, even 2. The scientists, a lot with a sense of humor, named them Octopolis and Oclantes. These are patches of seabed where dozens of octopuses live side by side. They dig themselves burrows. They visit one another. They squabble over housing, chase off strangers, make up a whole little society in a place where science had sworn for 100 years that octopuses were unsociable hermits. And you know the most interesting part? They talk there, without a single sound, with color and posture. Scientists worked out their language. If an octopus wants to show it means business, that it's ready to fight, it darkens, floods with dark color, rises higher on its arms, straightens up, makes itself look bigger. It's like raising your fists. And if the other one doesn't want to fight, wants to say, all right, I won't. Peace, it does the opposite. It pales, grows lighter, presses itself to the ground, shrinks. Dark, I'm angry. Pale, I surrender. They negotiate by the color of their skin over who yields to whom, most often without even coming to blows. In essence, they have a language of colors, and we've only just begun to read it. And now, a very recent discovery, one that still gives me goosebumps. Scientists began watching sleeping octopuses. Yes, octopuses sleep. That's been clear for a long time. But looking closely, they noticed something strange. The octopus is asleep, lying calmly, pale, even, and suddenly waves of color run across its skin. For a few seconds, it flares all over with patterns. Its arms twitch, its eyes move under the skin, and then it goes still again, pale and calm again. And so it goes, round and round. Scientists say octopuses seem to have two phases of sleep, a quiet one and this active one. And this active phase is eerily like our own, the very one in which humans dream. In our sleep, too, the eyes dart under the lids and the muscles twitch when we dream of something vivid. Do you see what I'm getting at? Everything points to the fact that octopuses dream. We can't, of course, wake an octopus and ask, well, what did you dream about? But these colored waves across the skin of a sleeping octopus. Some scientists seriously think this is the octopus replaying its day in its sleep. Maybe it's dreaming of creeping up on a crab or of fleeing from a shark. And its skin, while it sleeps, acts out that dream in colors, because for the octopus, the skin is its main language. A creature from the branch of snails, on the floor of a cold ocean. It dreams, and in its sleep it changes color, as if telling those dreams aloud, only without words. We'll probably never know exactly what it dreams of, but the mere fact that the question even makes sense is, to me, a small miracle. It would be dishonest to paint only the bright portrait. This gentle genius has a dark side too, and its name is the blue-ringed octopus. To look at, it's a completely harmless little thing, the size of a golf ball. It fits in the palm of your hand. It lives quietly in warm waters, most often off the coast of Australia, and it is one of the most venomous creatures on the entire planet. At rest, it's drab, grayish-yellow, brown, easily mistaken for a pebble. But disturb it, frighten it, and in an instant dozens of bright blue rings flare up all over its body. They burn and shimmer like a neon sign. It's a sight you can't tear your eyes from, beautiful to the point of dizziness. And here, remember the single most important thing. This beauty is not an invitation. It's a warning. In nature, bright, screaming coloring almost always means one short message. Don't touch me. I'm dangerous. Scientists call this aposematic coloring warning coloring. It's how a ladybird tells a bird, with its red, I taste bad, and a wasp, with its black and yellow, I'll sting. The blue-ringed octopus, with its flaring rings, is shouting, stop, back away, please. Because in its saliva is tetrodotoxin, the very same poison as in the infamous fugu pufferfish, which thrill seekers sometimes poison themselves on. It's a neurotoxin, a poison that strikes the nerves, and it is monstrously powerful, thousands of times stronger than cyanide. And now the most treacherous part. The bite of the blue-ringed octopus is almost painless, tiny. People often don't even notice it in the first minute. And a few minutes later, the poison begins, one by one, to switch off the muscles. All of them, including the ones we breathe with. The person stays conscious, but cannot move and cannot draw breath. There is no antidote for it. Not one. Only one thing can save a person. If the people nearby manage to start artificial respiration and don't give up for hours until the body itself, little by little, clears the poison, then it all turns out all right. And yet, remember the main thing. The reason I'm telling you this octopus is not a hunter of people. It's tiny, timid, and wants just one thing from us, to be left in peace. Almost all the accidents happen like this. A person sees a beautiful little thing on the seabed, picks it up to admire it, and that's it. The octopus didn't attack. It defended itself, and it had honestly warned us. It lit up its blue rings in advance, shouting as loudly as it could, "Please don't pick me up." We simply didn't hear. Even the deadly poison of the octopus is, when you think about it, not the weapon of an aggressor. It's a polite, desperate plea not to be touched. And now, the most moving chapter in the whole video. About love and about death. Get out the tissues. I mean it. For all its incredible mind, the octopus pays a terrible price. It lives a very short life, painfully short. Most species, just a year or two. It's only just grown into all this genius, and already it's time to go. A flash, a bright, short, dazzling life. And reproduction, for the octopus, is not the start of a new life, as it is for us. It's the end, in the most literal sense. Biologists have a strict word for this, semelparity. You reproduce once in your life, and you die. That's how salmon live, for instance, dying after spawning. And that's how the octopus lives. The male, after mating, slowly fades and soon dies. But the story of the female is, perhaps, the strongest example of a mother's love I've ever come across in nature. Listen. Having laid her eggs, and there can be tens, even hundreds of thousands of them, the female stops eating. Completely. She gives up food entirely, and she devotes the whole of the rest of her life to one single task, guarding her clutch. She wraps the eggs in her arms, tenderly, again and again. She blows little jets of fresh water over them from her siphon, so oxygen reaches the young, so they can breathe. She cleans off any dirt, any mold. She drives away anyone who comes near. She doesn't leave for a single minute, day or night. She doesn't hunt. She doesn't eat. And slowly, she wastes away, weakens, pales, giving herself to children she has never even seen. And when the day finally comes, and the tiny octopuses hatch one by one and swim off into the dark ocean to meet their own lives, the mother has no strength left, none at all. She dies, right there, by the emptied clutch. She gave herself entirely, to the last drop, to children she will never see grown, and who will never even know who she was. Scientists, by the way, have worked out what triggers this fading. Behind it stands a special organ near the eyes, the optic gland. It's something like an internal alarm clock. She's laid her eggs. The gland gives the body the command. That's it. The program is complete. You may now fade. And there was a famous experiment. They switched off this organ's signal in one female, and what do you think? She started eating again. She stopped starving herself, and she lived noticeably longer than usual, which means this death is not an accident and not wear and tear. It's programmed by nature, a built-in ending, in exchange for pouring all her strength, without remainder, into her offspring. And now, a record that's simply impossible to believe until you say it out loud. Off the coast of California, in the Monterey Canyon, scientists with a deep-sea vehicle once found, on the seabed, in cold pitch darkness, a female deep-sea octopus embracing her clutch. And they kept coming back to her, time after time, month after month. She was still there, still guarding, still blowing water over the eggs. She spent without a single crumb of food, embracing her future children, 4.5 years, 53 months, in darkness, in hunger, in faithfulness. It's the longest period of care for offspring among all known animals on our planet, longer than any bird, any beast, any human carries and raises their young. 4.5 years in darkness, without food, embracing her eggs, only so that her children might get their chance at life. A soft body, blue blood, 3 tired hearts, and a love that, honestly, would put many of us to shame. And, finally, the very fact for which serious scientists, not bloggers, but scientists, genuinely call the octopus an alien from Earth. Stay with me. It's a worthy chapter before the finale. Every living creature has a blueprint, DNA. It's the instruction by which the body is built and run. Eye color, the shape of the arms, how the brain is wired. It's all written there, letter by letter. And in us, humans, this instruction is almost ironclad. What's written in the genes is what gets carried out. Exactly, with no improvising. We can't just tweak our own blueprint to suit the weather outside. But the octopus can. It edits its own instruction on the fly. Look, between the DNA blueprint and the finished body, there's a go-between, a molecule called RNA. It's like a working copy of the instruction. A copy is taken from the master blueprint, and the body assembles the parts it needs from that copy. Well, the octopus rewrites this working copy on a massive scale, right in the middle of the process. Not the blueprint itself, but the copy, the clean copy before the job. Scientists called this RNA editing. And whereas in us, humans, such edits are one-offs, extremely rare, in the octopus, it's done on an industrial scale. It rewrites tens of thousands of sites, constantly, especially in the cells of the brain and nerves. And what for? Well, here's the beautiful part. It's busiest with this editing when the water temperature changes. Got colder down in the deep. The octopus immediately adjusts the RNA in its nerve cells so that the brain keeps working properly even in the cold, without lagging. In other words, it fine-tunes its own biochemistry on the fly to fit its surroundings. Got colder, it adapted, as if you could reconfigure your own body for the frost by sheer force of thought. On stepping outside in winter, we can't do that. Almost nothing in the living world can. But the octopus lives like this every day. It's one of its quiet superpowers. Mind you, there's a suspicion that it pays something for this flexibility. Scientists think when you rewrite your working copies so freely, here and now, it becomes harder to pass useful changes on to your children the ordinary way, through evolution, as if the octopus made a choice, not to slowly improve the species from generation to generation, but to be maximally flexible personally, by itself, today, to tune itself to the momentary world, instead of bequeathing the settings to its descendants. A creature that rewrites its own blueprint to match the temperature of the water. Well, tell me if that isn't a mind of some completely different, unfamiliar design. Then what is it? Well then, let's take a breath and gather it all together. I'll simply list it, and you try not to smile, imagining that all of this is about one single animal. 3 hearts, blue blood, built on copper, 9 centers of thought, 1 in the head, 8 in the arms, and each arm thinking for itself. Skin that, perhaps, sees light without eyes, suckers that taste the world, a body without a single bone, flowing through a hole the size of a coin, an engineer that carries a coconut house with it, an actor that plays a sea snake, a personality that knows your face and plays out of boredom, a creature that builds cities, dreams dreams, and rewrites its own DNA to suit the cold, and a mother that goes hungry in the darkness for 4.5 years for her children. And all of this is not on another planet, not in a science fiction film. All of this is swimming right now in the sea we wade into up to our knees every summer. A few years ago, a film came out, My Octopus Teacher. Maybe you've seen it. A simple story. For a whole year, day after day, one man swam out to a single wild octopus off the coast of Africa. He just swam out and watched. And she, wild, timid, gradually stopped being afraid of him. She began to recognize him. One day, she herself first reached out an arm and touched his hand, and later she even settled trustingly on his chest, holding on with her arms. A wild sea creature and a human, simply because he came without malice every day. That film won an Oscar, but the audience didn't weep because of the filming or the music. They wept because between a human and a creature from the branch of snails, something real had suddenly appeared. Trust, attention, almost friendship, across a chasm of 600 million years of evolution. They reached each other and understood. And that, to my mind, is the octopus's great lesson. We're so used to thinking of ourselves as the summit, the only true mind on the planet, the king of nature, the measure of all things. And the octopus is living, wet, eight-armed proof that nature can create a mind in a completely different way, not to our template, and perhaps no less deep than ours, just different. We don't even really know what it's like to be one. All our lives we stare up at the sky and ask, are we alone in the universe? Is there another mind out there somewhere, unlike our own? And all this time, it was right here, right beside us, in the water beneath our feet, watching us with its strange eyes, and who knows, maybe thinking about these noisy two-legged creatures, exactly what we think about the stars. So the next time you see an octopus, on the shore, in an aquarium, behind glass, or even just here, on the screen, pause for a second, and remember, before you is not seafood, and not a product from the frozen aisle. Before you is the closest thing to a real alien that you will most likely ever meet in your entire life. And it thinks, in its own way, strange and hard to grasp, but it thinks, right now, as you and I are speaking, somewhere on the seabed, an octopus is thinking, if this ocean, alien surprised you today even half as much as it once surprised me, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It genuinely helps, and it's the best thank you can give. And there are many more stories ahead about creatures we've been underestimating all this time. Thank you for staying with me to the end, and take care of those who think differently from us. Sometimes they are the most fascinating thing on this whole planet. See you next time.